That's awesome. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, speaking of a daily commitment, I will tell you that from a personal experience, meditating or having a mindfulness practice daily has been a game changer for me. And this is something that we're hearing about a lot. At least for me in my world, I hear this often, but it's not a new concept by any means, right? Thousands and thousands of years. Julianna is my mindfulness coach. I called on Julianna last year when I was doing a double marathon and highly underprepared for this event. And I called Julianna and said, if my legs won't get me through it, you're going to have to help me with my mind. And so she did, and it worked. And I thank Julianna for helping me through that experience. To the elite that I know, Julianna is their coach. She is creating online programs. She is speaking on stages. She is working one-to-one with individuals like, I don't know if I can say certain people, but high-level executives to like band members of Maroon 5, etc., etc., etc. She's here today. We're super excited. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. Julianna Ray.
Hey, everybody. So, how many of you have ever heard of this word mindfulness? Show of hands. Check that out. Virtually everybody in this room. Just a few years ago, I could have asked the same question, and maybe one or two people would have raised their hands. So what's happened? Mindfulness has been around a long time. I've been practicing it for 20 years. What's the change? Well, science is the change. For the past few years, science has been researching it, and that's unfolded a wonderful series of events. But the thing is, you may have heard of mindfulness, but you might be hazy on what exactly it is. And that's because of its popularity, it's being used in a range of ways. So I just want to clarify for you that the mindfulness we're going to be focusing on today is what I like to call mindfulness with a big M. It's a style of meditation that is not religious in any way, so anyone can practice it. And it's what's being studied by science. It's the mindfulness that's being studied by science. The approach I'm going to show you, in fact, is being researched at Harvard Medical Center with breakthrough results, as well as at Carnegie Mellon. One of the top mindfulness researchers in the field is literally down the road at Carnegie Mellon. His name is David Cresswell, and he's been using this system to study its effects on people. So we're going to get into the why you would want to do this practice. And we're going to get into the how, which is my favorite part. We're actually going to be doing some practice so that you walk out of here empowered with a set of skills that can have a radical, positive transformation in your life if you apply them. And that's what's really exciting for me, to be able to share that. That's empowerment for you. So let's actually get started with just a couple of minutes of silence together. And I'm going to give you some really simple instructions, and then later on we're going to do more practice, and I'm going to build out those instructions so you have an infrastructure of support for practicing. But just to begin now, we're going to start with two simple instructions. Number one, you can keep your eyes open or closed, as you prefer. If you have something you like to do, if you have a meditation or way of centering yourself you like to do, feel free to do that. But if you'd like to listen to these instructions, it's very simple. Notice what you're experiencing and stay open to what you're noticing. Super simple. Notice what you're experiencing, stay open to what you're noticing. And we're going to do that just for a couple of minutes right now together. Okay. So, how many of you found that pleasant in some way? Maybe it was restful, maybe you had nice energy, felt a connection with people in the room, great. And how many of you found that unpleasant in some way? Maybe your mind was distracted, maybe you were wondering what it means to stay open. Okay, great. So here's a way to understand mindfulness. It is a set of skills that you can develop to increase your overall well-being, both physical and emotional, your overall tranquility, your overall energy, your overall ability to focus on what you consider important, right? It's a set of skills to continually up-level that baseline, whether or not your experience is pleasant or unpleasant, right? So that's what I call empowerment. A lot of people have the expectation they sit down to meditate and they're supposed to drop into some deep state. And actually, I can tell by this group, this is probably a group that's had some real experience, because rarely do I get one person raising their hand. I was actually relieved that you raised your hand, because then I get to speak about the fact that a lot of times people have expectations, they place expectations on the practice, and when they're disappointed, when it's hard, when it's challenging, they tell themselves, well, either this isn't working or I'm not doing it right. And then they often fall off their practice, and that's a real shame. We want to take an approach to practice that is more like working out at a mind gym, right? When you go to the gym, you don't expect to have a great workout on that particular day necessarily, because you understand that you are strengthening your muscles, your conditioning, long term. And mindfulness, meditation in general, works exactly the same way. You are strengthening your mental conditioning. You're strengthening your ability to attend, your attention in specific ways long term. So it's really important to keep that in mind. That'll keep you motivated to practice through the ups and downs of, okay, it's hard today, okay, it's very rewarding today. Right? Make sense? Great. So let's talk a little bit about the science, what the science has shown, the benefits that you get out of mindfulness practice. Improved focus, clarity, and productivity, obviously very meaningful to this room and people in general. Lower stress and blood pressure. Strengthen your immune system, better sleep cycle. So all sorts of amazing physical benefits from doing practice, which may be counterintuitive. You think you're focusing with your mind, but actually it's having physiological effects. Heightened creativity, empathy, emotional regulation, EI. Well, we all know how important that is in connecting to customers and in building rapport with people naturally in our relationships. And then also slows brain degeneration, which I'll get into in a little bit. So you can see there's a range of effects, of benefits that are physiological and also emotional. And for that reason, corporate America has been completely embracing this practice, and it's very exciting. Companies that are bleeding edge like Google, but also companies like Procter & Gamble and Aetna. So, and in fact, they did a study at Aetna where after an 8-week training of mindfulness, there was a $2,000 per head annual reduction in medical expenses. So that speaks to the bottom line of a company. So this practice, which has these profound benefits and rewards for you, also speaks to, that's very rare, that it speaks to the bottom line of a company, and therefore it's being embraced. And I'm actually super excited because, as I mentioned, David Cresswell, who is just a hop, skip, and a jump away if you ever want to participate in one of his studies, he is one of the top researchers in the field of mindfulness, and I'm going to be partnering with him on a workplace mindfulness research study that's going to be done at Fathom Digital Marketing in a company in Ohio. So that's one way I'm super excited to further our understanding of how mindfulness works and what the benefits are. And additionally, I participated as a subject in a UCLA study. They actually took an MRI of my brain, and they had a control who was my same age and gender and left-handed like me, and they compared our brains. And isn't it gorgeous? I think, in fact, it's so cute, right? Yeah. You know, I think this is the only slide you need right here. This is the big selling point of mindfulness. You guys are all closed now, right? You want to practice? Just based on seeing this. So anyway, when they put my MRI, they showed me this brain, my brain, against another person's. You could see there were significantly more dark patches on her brain. And that's the natural degeneration process, but it was just much slower in mine. So the brain maintains its health for longer with this practice. Pretty cool. But I realized that brain health may not be, you know, the most exciting motivator for you. So let's talk a little bit about the rewards that people self-report when they practice mindfulness. So there are a lot of really wonderful rewards that come from practice. You might experience deeper states of tranquility. You might experience energy flowing through your body. You experience getting deeply absorbed into the experience, which concentration in and of itself is rewarding. When we get deeply absorbed in activities, it feels good. So wonder, clarity, wisdom, and insight. And this bottom one, discovering a connection or oneness with everything, that's kind of the core of it all. Experiencing that oneness, which is called many things in many contemplative traditions, that is the core of these other benefits. So in any case, those benefits can keep you motivated to practice. And as I mentioned earlier, it can get confusing because sometimes they're readily available and sometimes they're not. But what you want to think about is the long term. This is a long distance run. And when you first start your practice, the rewards may come slowly at first. So really, a lot of my job is getting you to hang in there long enough that you start to experience the rewards and benefits directly, and then you stay motivated. So that first few months is tough. It's challenging. So what I thought I'd do is share with you a little bit about my journey, and then we're going to get into some practice. So many years ago, in the mid-90s, I was working as a waitress in Los Angeles, and I had an epiphany. I remember it vividly. I was sitting in my car after a shift, and I thought to myself, I'm miserable as a waitress. I'm not living my life's purpose. You know, my gifts are not being recognized and acknowledged. This sucks. But that wasn't the epiphany. The epiphany was actually, it came as a result of the fact that prior to being a waitress, I was actually in maybe the top 1 or 2% of the population who gets to live their dream. I had a rare opportunity, which we're going to talk about, to live my dream. And it was because I had reached those heights that in the parking lot that day, I could say to myself with honesty, you know what? I got that chance, and if I'm totally honest with myself, I wasn't happy then either. And that was the big breakthrough moment for me. What is going on here that I'm not happy now? Yes, it's obvious from the conditions why I might not be. But then I wasn't happy either. What's that all about? And when I thought about it, I realized that my experience as I was living out my dream, it was like a series of mirages. I would achieve a certain goal that I thought was the most important goal. It had to happen. It had to happen. It would happen, right? And then what would happen? I'd get to it, and it would dissolve in front of my eyes. Either I wasn't showing up the way I thought I should be showing up, or it wasn't quite what I expected it to be, or, well, wait a minute, It's not the actual goal. It's just a stepping stone to the goal. The real goal is over there. It's outside myself and in the future. Has anyone ever had this experience? Outside myself, in the future. Outside myself, in the future. And I saw that my mind was like setting a trap for myself again and again and again and again, where fulfillment was always outside myself and in the future. And in that moment in my car, I thought, that is no way to live your life. We want fulfillment in as much of our lives as possible, not always outside and in the future. So that was the first big revelation. The second big revelation was when your life hinges, as mine did, on achieving certain dreams and goals, you start to get desperate. And you start to justify, I must achieve this goal at all costs, and it's for the good of everybody. I got to achieve this goal at all costs. And what starts to happen? Our integrity starts to get compromised in our desperate need to achieve certain things. And I saw that happening to me. I saw that I had become the kind of person that walks into a party, targets the person who I think might be most helpful, and maneuvers my way through conversation to connecting with that person. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't anything there's tremendous value in connecting with people who can further your goals. And when you have a shared interest, it's natural. But I'm talking about authenticity. And I'm talking about having a transparent agenda. I didn't like what I was seeing. I didn't want success to hinge on that. Because what is success worth if it comes at the cost of authentic connections with people, right? Where you're constantly walking around in life having this transparent agenda, you're not being present with what's going on. What kind of success is that at the end of the day, inside? So that was my second big revelation. I don't want success if it comes at that cost. And I don't want fulfillment to always be in the future and outside myself. Okay, so I knew what I didn't want. How was I going to get what I did want? I had no idea. I really didn't know where to start. But at least I was clear on what I didn't want. All right, I got real intense with them. So let's talk a little bit, back up. I'm going to fill in the gaps you may have now and, what was this dream I was living? I came out to LA in the early 90s with a couple of modest aspirations. I was going to be an Oscar-winning actress and a Grammy-winning singer-songwriter. So modest goals, and as you do when you have goals, you write a to-do list. So I arrived in town, and I wrote a to-do list, and on it I had things like get an agent, get a guest starring spot on a primetime TV show, get a record deal on a major label, do my laundry, and of course it was the 90s, so you must get a plaid shirt. So I had these aspirations, and sure enough, within about a year's time, I had actually accomplished all three of those top goals. I still don't own a plaid shirt. But I had gotten an agent. He wasn't very powerful. I should have been more specific. He sent me on one audition during the busiest time of the year called pilot season, and I booked that one audition, and they flew me business class up to Vancouver, and there was a fruit basket in my hotel room, which to me, you've made it. When there is a fruit basket in your hotel room, you are living large. So pretty much I could have quit then. But, and the role involved crying on demand, which I happen to excel at. Crying in general, so a real great, strong skill of mine. I'm a real good crier. So I loved it, and I came back down to LA, and lo and behold, within a couple of months, I met this iconic producer, a guy named Jeff Lynne. Have you ever heard of the band ELO? Right? Evil woman. You know that song, right? Yeah. Woo! So I met Jeff Lynne. That's my little pop star moment coming out. I met Jeff Lynne, and I got a record deal signed by the president of Warner Brothers to make a record of my own music as a solo artist. Pretty big stuff, right? So my world began to change pretty radically at that point. I was living the dream. This is what living the dream looked like for me. I actually found that material and had someone design that little dress there. So I would bop to the Warner Brothers offices, and they would have lined up. The PR department really loved the record, so they got a ton of press for it. I was in all the newspapers. They'd line up foreign press, and I'd go in and I'd talk about myself, which also I really enjoyed. But I felt like I was contributing. How cool that I get to talk about myself and contribute to people's lives in a positive way. That's awesome. So I really enjoyed it, and I felt people would, take inspiration from my story. That, hey, if I can do it, anyone can do it kind of thing. And so I really loved it, and I loved the process of making the record. It was like pop star boot camp. When you do anything at a level of mastery, work with a huge producer. His record prior to mine was the Traveling Wilburys and Tom Petty and Roy Orbison and Bob Dylan and George Harrison and me. So working at that level of mastery, you get thrown in the deep end. And it is boot camp. It's hard work. But man, I learned so much from the experience. And I absolutely loved it. And I was doing what I was passionate about. And it was beautiful. Got a lot of great press, as you can see. And the promotions department didn't hear a single. And what that means is, we're not going to put any money behind your record. And so you all know where this story leads. So within about a couple of years, I was back to waitressing. And I was scared. I was scared because I didn't know if I would ever get another go round with this. I did continue on in my, and went on to do some really wonderful things in music. But at that time, I really had no idea what the future held in store. But I was scared for a bigger reason, which I'll share with you now, which is that prior to having this explosive, wonderful opportunity, I actually lived through the darkest year of my life, that year I talked to you about, where all those wonderful things ended up happening. That was actually the darkest year of my life, when I first moved to LA. And I would wake up every morning in a level of pain emotionally that I didn't know, I couldn't stand it. It was unbearable how much pain I was experiencing every day. And I didn't know how it would ever go away. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what to do about it. I felt hopeless, and I was suffering profoundly. And I started thinking about ending my life. I couldn't see any alternative. And at a certain point, I managed to recognize that sometimes we live for other people, not for ourselves, and that was enough for me to move through that. And then these opportunities happened. Right after, these opportunities happened. And they buoyed me. They saved me. They got me in touch with my passion. And that helped me move forward in life. But when that went away, then what? I was really frightened that I would slip back into that state that I had been in beforehand, and I did start to slip. And it was scary. And so I went to a therapist, and it was that therapist that introduced me to meditation. In 5 minutes, in her office, she gave me a couple quick instructions, and I thought, well, I was very skeptical. I thought, what's a bunch of sitting going to do, really? Right? But okay, whatever. It's something I can do for free. I was a starving, struggling artist. I liked free. It's something I can do anytime I want. I'm going to give this a try. And I'll give it 3 months. I'll see how I feel. After 3 months, okay, it was doing something. I wasn't quite sure what it was doing. 2 years later, I was still doing it. I liked it. And part of the reason that I'm here today, part of what motivates me is I want to compress your learning curve. It doesn't have to take 2 years to really catch on to this stuff. And I hung in there, and now that I understand the potential of it, it would have been nice to compress that and have some of these results sooner and go deeper in it. So that motivates me to share it with you. So, I had been meditating for about 2 years and not really knowing what I was doing but liking the results, and I started to have these experiences that I couldn't understand. What is it? Simple little things. Wow, there's something really pleasant at the end of my exhale. What's that about? Right? I knew nothing at this point. So I knew I needed an expert, right? But I also knew I was very woo-woo averse. You know what I mean by that? I was very anti-woo-woo. I'm not into the new age thing. So if anybody had, at that time had mentioned chakras or crystals, I was going to dart from the room, la la la, it wasn't. And I ran the risk of throwing the whole thing out, and I knew I didn't want to do that. So I knew it had to be the right kind of teacher, and I was introduced to this guy not long after, fortunately. And as soon as I heard him, I thought, okay, this guy's speaking my language, Shinzen Yang. It's practical. When he speaks, it's logical to me, it makes sense. And he gives me clear procedures that I know how to follow. I'm on board. So I called for more. I got these cassettes. That's how long ago this was. Got these cassettes, and I called for more. And the woman on the other end of the phone said, well, he's leading a retreat in a couple of weeks. Why don't you come on that? And I thought, a retreat? I've been doing this for half an hour a day, every day. You want me to go sit for 6 solid days from 5 a.m. till 10 at night and do this stuff? I might lose my mind. However, the truth of the matter is, I was already losing my mind. And so, I was just desperate enough. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And that retreat is where it all locked into place for me. That retreat is where I saw clearly the value of this practice. And it all happened at lunch on the Wednesday. So I'm there for a few days. And, of course, my goal setting, right? My to-do list, get enlightened. I had a week. Let's get to this because I got stuff to do. I got music to make. I got places to be. I'm going to do all the sits, and then we'll be good to go. Didn't quite happen that way. 3 days in, I was sitting at lunch, and I had developed some momentum with these skills that I'm going to be talking to you about later. Concentration power, sensory clarity, and equanimity. We had been practicing these skills for 3 days. By the 3rd day, it had started to kick in, and I was sitting at lunch and I was eating a radish, and I was really focused on eating that radish. And as I chewed it, all the little nuances, I could notice that the tingling of the radish and the heat of the radish and the crunch of the radish. And I was noticing that buzzing, tingling heat in my mouth. And as I noticed it, as I paid attention to it, it began to spread, and it began to flow. And that flow was very pleasant. And as I began to observe this flow of energy, the flow began to spread beyond my jaw. And the next thing I know, and remember, this is a pragmatist talking to you here. This is an anti-woo-woo person talking to you here. I had a bliss geyser shooting out the top of my skull, right? I'm sitting there, Miss Pragmatist, with this geyser of bliss shooting out the top of my head. And in that moment, I had a very practical revelation, which is, hey, guess what? my mind and body are far more resilient than I've been giving them credit for. All I did was a bunch of exercises, and here I'm having this experience. What does that mean? That means that if I keep doing these exercises, I'll experience this more and more often. That means over time, this will start to be my baseline. I will start to experience energy, tranquility, well-being, absorptive focus regularly. And I suddenly saw a way out. Go back to that parking garage. I saw a way out of my conditions. I saw a way forward for my mind. So I hope this gives you some inspiration on your course. The new normal and the tools to work productively with any kind of experience, right? So no matter how dark it got from that point forward, I knew that that darkness could lead me to greater well-being. Prior to that moment, I was at this level down here. I feel so much compassion for that person who had no tools. And her level was down here, and when things got good, they got good momentarily, but they'd always inevitably return to that stasis. And when things got bad, I ran the risk of going down the rabbit hole. Well, I saw a permanent way out of that. Welcome. Come, sit, enjoy. I saw a permanent way out of that. And that's empowerment. So it's one thing for me to talk to you about it. It's another thing for you to do it yourselves. And so I want to spend the rest of this time with us actually practicing, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions afterwards. I am going to be doing a breakout session. This takes a little bit to get under your fingers. This approach in particular, there's a little more upfront learning that goes on. It's not as simple as, hey, just focus on your breath. But the upside to it is, while there's more learning that goes on the back end, it's very robust. I'm going to show you basically how any experience you have can be a meditation. And when you understand that, wow, it frees everything up. It means you can be developing your skills while you're exercising or while you're eating. It means that if you choose to focus on just sounds, for instance, if you love music and you want to make this practice, you want to do this practice while you're listening to music, it's going to enrich your experience of the music, and it's going to strengthen your skills that affect your whole life. So I like giving this because although it's a little complicated up front, in the big picture it gives you a lot of choice. It also will help you understand, if you already do a practice like breath focus or something like that, it'll help you understand the principles behind doing breath focus effectively. So let's do a little practice. Okay, I've already gone through that. I just did that there. I'm a slide behind. Let's get right to practice. So as I mentioned, sometimes when you meditate, you have an object of focus, which is breath work, breath focus, right? At the tip of the nose or the abdomen. Is everyone kind of familiar with that? Makes sense? So in this practice, your object of focus is anything and everything. At the beginning of our time together, I asked you to notice your experience and stay open to what you noticed. So now we're going to put some context to that. We're going to give you a framework. It's like the difference between trying to pick up a rock to strengthen your biceps, or going to the gym and knowing what the weights are and knowing how to use them. That's all this is for, is to give you a framework so that you can exercise your mind more efficiently and optimize the experience. So we're going to divide your experience into 3 categories: see, hear, and feel. Any experience you ever have is some combination, it's 1, 2, or 3 of those categories. Here's what I mean. Right now, you're sitting there in the chair, you're listening to me, right? Maybe you feel the chair, maybe you feel the temperature of the room. You're seeing me as I'm talking to you, see. You're hearing me as I'm talking to you, hear. But let's take that a step further. Maybe you're also daydreaming about what you're going to have for lunch right now. It happens. What happens as you're daydreaming? Well, maybe you're imagining a tuna fish sandwich. What's that? If you're picturing a tuna fish sandwich in your mind, what would that be? C. Very good. And now let's say you say to yourself, I can't wait to have that tuna fish sandwich. You're saying it in your mind. None of us can hear you say it. What would that be? Bam! You guys are on it. And now let's say you could not be more excited about this tuna fish sandwich. It is the most exciting thing you could ever imagine. What would that be? Bam! You got it. Okay. So when we refer to see, hear, and feel, we're referring both to the images, what you're seeing in the mind, as well as what you're seeing in the environment. Referring to what you hear in the mind, so self-talk, or any kind of blah, blah, blah activity going on there, or what you hear in the environment. And we're referring to both emotional type sensations, such as that feeling of excitement, but also physical sensations, which includes taste and smell. So as you're eating that tuna fish sandwich, yum, yum, you are feeling it, you're tasting it, you're smelling it, you're feeling it in your mouth, and maybe you're feeling some joy. Right? Feel. We got that? So here's a little trick question. Let's suppose you notice the silence in the room. Would that be see, hear, or feel? Bam! You got it. Hear. Exactly. Because why? Because what you're noticing is silence. You're noticing the absence of sound. We'll do questions after. So, see, hear, feel. Anything active, so if you notice an active image, but also anything restful, such as silence, or if you notice that your mind is quiet. If you notice a blank screen, your attention is drawn inside your mind to what we'll call the mental screen in your mind, but you're not really noticing anything there. You're noticing a blank screen, right? So we've got these three categories, and we're going to do what's called noting with mental labels. This is the apparatus, right? We're in the gym of your experience. We've divided it into these three categories, see, hear, and feel. And now this is the apparatus. Noting is like this. You're allowing your attention to move around as you sit there, and it comes to land on something. Maybe you find your attention's tuning into my voice right now. So you notice my voice, and then you stay with what you're noticing for a few seconds. So you stay with the experience of listening to my voice for a few seconds. And then maybe your attention is drawn into the body, at the belly. You notice you're hungry. You notice, and then you stay with that experience of hunger, stay open to it for a few seconds. So this process of letting your attention go wander, letting it land somewhere, and then staying with what you notice. Land somewhere, stay with what you notice, right? Noticing and staying with, noticing and staying with. That's called noting. Mental labels support the noting, so you don't get overwhelmed. You don't have to notice everything that's going on. You may notice a lot of activity. Just choose your moments, right? So it might be busy, 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 but then you notice, okay, my attention has landed on the temperature, the way the temperature of the room feels right now. I'm going to stay with how the way, the heat of the room right now for a few seconds. All right? And then, so you notice, then you label, feel. You use that label feel, and you stay with what you notice for a few seconds. So I'm going to demonstrate for you now so you get the idea of it. You're going to be saying these labels to yourself in your mind. But I'm going to say them out loud so you get an idea of pace and tone. See. Feel. Feel. Okay, so my pace is even, not too fast, not too slow. My tone is even. You want your tone to be nice and steady. And in that moment, I noticed a gentleman sitting a few rows up. So that was C. And then I noticed the temperature of the room. So that was feel. And then I noticed the temperature of the room again. So you can re-note the same thing. That was feel again. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, great. So let's try it, and then I'll take all questions afterwards. All right. So you can keep your eyes open or closed. We're going to get to that definition after we practice. Keeping your eyes open or closed. Now, just checking in with your experience. So your attention is moving around wherever it moves. Let it move freely. At some point, your attention will come to rest momentarily somewhere. And when it does, you label that. Is it see, hear, or feel? If it's more than one category, just pick one category, doesn't matter which. Maybe the one that's more prominent. And then you stay with the experience for a few minutes, unless it disappears, in which case you just allow your attention to wander again until it settles. The moment it settles, is it see, hear, or feel? And then label to yourself in your mind, see, hear, or feel, whichever it happens to be. If the experience changes, that's fine. Just stay with it for a few seconds. It's okay to guess. This is your first time on the ride. Give it a chance. Make this a discovery process. As you stay with your experience for a few seconds and a few seconds, discover it moment by moment. So I want to get to some definitions and some questions. So it's real brief today, but we do have the breakout session. We're going to practice for longer, and you can really get this under your fingers if you'd like. So you can think of mindfulness as a set of 3 attention skills working together. So as you did that practice, you were developing 3 skills. The first skill is concentration power. And concentration power is the ability to focus on what you consider to be important, right? So that whole activity, you were efforting to what? To notice and to define what you were noticing with one of these labels. That activity develops your concentration power. And the value of concentration power is obviously what? That you improve your ability to choose what you focus on, which has profound relevance in our lives. To be able to focus on the thoughts that we would prefer to focus on, the thoughts that are productive and are going to really serve us, right? To be able to focus on the positive aspects of our experience, right? And value them more highly. There's tremendous power in that. So a lot of value in concentration power. Another aspect of it is getting deeply absorbed in your experience, as I mentioned earlier. It's intrinsically rewarding. If you think about a day at work where you're really in the zone, you'll notice that you've got deep concentration going on naturally. So these skills help you get in the zone more in your work. Sensory clarity. The ability to track and explore your sensory experience in real time. So there's the noticing, and then there's the staying with the experience for a few seconds. That enhances sensory clarity. Also being able to make distinctions, like this is see, hear, or feel. Those labels help you define more clearly what you're noticing when you're noticing it. And then there's this process of discovery that happens in those few seconds, where you make distinctions, you get into subtleties. And why is this useful? Well, it's useful for a number of reasons. Resolution is one way to think about it. You know, those moments where you have clarity about things, where things come into focus. We take this system that gives us so much information, we take it completely for granted. We're on automatic pilot with our lives, relying on this system. We don't tend to explore it and discover it. When we explore it and discover it, we make revelations. When we see things up close, when we carefully examine, we make very interesting discoveries about our experience. It also helps reduce our overwhelm. If you, for example, let's say you are struggling with thoughts and feelings that are overwhelming, if you can start to categorize them, what part of this is what I'm seeing, what part of this is what I'm hearing, what part of this is what I'm feeling, that will reduce your overwhelm. You're deconstructing it, and that makes it more manageable. Equanimity. The ability to allow sensory experience to come and go without push and pull. So in other words, you're trying not to fight with your experience, you're remaining open to it, like I said. And this reduces friction in the system. When we tend to fight with our experience, we tend to want it to be this way and want it to not be that way, right? We get attached to certain things and we reject other things. That creates a kind of friction in the system and it actually dampens our energy, weighs us down. So let's take some questions now. I want to have time for questions, and I know we're running out of time. So we can, should we start early with the questions, or shall I continue?
Sorry, I missed it.
What's your preference? Oh, should we start early with the questions? Well, I'll start early with questions, and then you can come up and we'll keep going. Great. So anybody, I noticed a question over here. Do you still have that question, or was that cleared up?
Sure. I guess sometimes
There's a microphone right here for you.
Oh.
I can be loud. Hi.
Hi.
I notice sometimes when I'm meditating or even doing like a working meditation that there's a sense of stillness that comes over me eventually, and it's not even like that I'm feeling it or seeing it or hearing it. It's just all encompassing, like quiet, and
Wonderful.
It's all three really.
Yes.
And I just wasn't sure if that's something
That's
that
a
you
great,
noticed.
so that's what's called an insight. And it actually speaks to the second skill I mentioned, sensory clarity. Sensory clarity you can think of making distinctions, right? Being able to distinguish, okay, is it see, is it hear, or is it feel? But you can also think of sensory clarity at the deepest level of the discovery that actually there's a blurring of the boundaries where that stillness, as you mentioned, it's all encompassing. Goes back to that reward that I described, the oneness experience. So when we have greater resolution, when we get into deeper states of focus, we discover that underneath all of our varied experience is this encompassing, pervasive being. That's right. So we connect with that more deeply. So sometimes it's a time for making distinctions, and sometimes it's a time for those distinctions to disappear. And in either case, you're becoming clear, and you're honoring what's true in that moment. That's a great question. Yeah?
Hi. So if I'm wanting clarity on like a question or something I'm struggling with in my life, is it better or more useful to kind of just sit quietly like you just demonstrated for us now, or have a question or the idea in my mind first and try to focus on that? Because I think there's more than one way to meditate, and since I'm a beginner, I would like to know.
Got it. So
your
let me
thoughts.
see if I understand the question. The question is, let's say I've got an issue that I'm grappling with. Is it better to just sit and do kind of like this broad focus, or should I contemplate the answer to the question? You know, you have the choice to do either. One of them I would not call mindfulness. The contemplating the answer to the question is not mindfulness, so it won't necessarily strengthen these skills. But sometimes contemplating the answer to the question is what you need to do right at that moment. However, I would suggest that when you do these skills, when you practice mindfulness, and this is only one approach to it, by the way, you don't have to do this specific technique I showed you. I like it because it's broad and that gives you lots of ideas about how to work. In any case, when you practice mindfulness, where you allow yourself not to have the answer to any question, we spend a lot of time trying to problem solve and fix. A lot of times, if you give yourself the space, that answer, that gives wisdom a chance to bubble up. So that's why I recommend it in the big picture.
Julianna, we have one right down here in the front.
Oh, okay.
Where would smell? Where would
Smell would be feel.
Would be feel?
Great
Okay.
question.
You may have said that. I just
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'll go right here, and then we've got a gentleman in the back. Yeah.
Okay, so what if you think of something negative when you're, yeah, because I had something enter my brain that was annoying, and I'm like, I couldn't get rid of it, and you said to focus on it, and I'm like, eh.
That's right. That's a great question, and that goes back to the gym. Basically, when you have that negative thought, you're working the stairs. Who here likes to do the stairs? I hate the stairs personally. You like the stairs? I hate the stairs. So what I mean by that is that's your growth opportunity. That's where that's your edge. You're working your edge at that point. And what you're doing is you're applying your skills. So if it's negative, what's going on in a negative thought? Let's say it's, oh, I can't believe I did that thing. I'm such an idiot. Let's say that's that thought, right? I can't believe I did that thing. I'm such an idiot. Well, if you deconstruct that, what's it comprised of? Maybe you have an image of yourself doing that thing that you think you're such an idiot for doing. Maybe you've got this thought. I can't believe this verbal thought. I can't believe I did that thing. I'm such an idiot. Then you've got emotions. You've got shame, maybe, embarrassment, frustration, fear, right? When you deconstruct, when you start to get to the root of what that negative thought is composed of, what are the ingredients of that negative thought, you take the charge out of it. The reason that negative thought is pushing and pulling on you The reason it's driving you nuts is because you're inadvertently fueling it without realizing it. Because you're not conscious, you're not clear about the dynamic that's going on between your feelings and your thinking. And the feelings are fueling the thinking, and the thinking is fueling the feelings, and they're going in a cycle. The minute you can start to get a handle on what's happening and have equanimity, stop fighting with it. But don't attach to it either. It's just a thought. How many thoughts do we have? How many crazy thoughts come into people's minds all day long? We have to learn how to not give it weight, but we also don't want to push it away. We don't want to try to stop it. The minute we try to stop that thought is the minute we're engaging with it and inadvertently fueling it. Does that make sense? Great. Other questions?
What is the significance of the difference between doing it with your eyes open and your eyes closed?
Ah, great question. So what's the significance of eyes open versus eyes closed? Okay, so some people find it easier to concentrate with their eyes closed. So I like to, and sometimes you can, you want to focus on the mental screen instead of having the eyes open. It's interesting to you. So you might keep your eyes closed because it's interesting to you or because it heightens you feel it heightens your concentration. Especially as you're just beginning, it's important to do whatever will motivate you. So absolutely feel free to keep your eyes closed. As your practice evolves, and mind you, I kept my eyes closed for years as a part of my formal practice when I would sit. It was just more natural for me, and I found that when I opened my eyes, I felt kind of disconnected. Eyes open, some people absolutely love eyes open practice, number one, so I like to give it as an option because I want you to find what works for you, and it's different for each individual. Secondly, eyes open practice, ultimately, you're going to want to get into that whenever the time is right, because then it frees you to do practice in action. Then all of your daily activity can become a practice, so you're improving those skills, so you're upping your baseline. Just, it optimizes, it makes more efficiency. So the big picture, you might want to go there, but feel free, eyes closed, absolutely is a great way to work as well. Make sense?
One down here.
Yep.
Hello. So my question is all right, so I've been aware of the benefits of meditation for a while now, but do you have any tips on how to just actually get into the seated, just
The consistency of
the
it?
consistency and just doing it?
Yeah. So a lot of people, it's funny, one of the most common comments I get is, oh, I love meditating. I can't get myself to do it. Right? Super common. It's ironic. You sort of think, why? If it's the medicine, it's right there, and yet you won't reach for it. What's that about? So it's about a lot of things. Initially, as you're practicing, you're working against psychological habit patterns, very deep. Any good habit, you have to work through all the resistance to adding one more good habit into your diet. If I have one more good habit, I already flossed my teeth. What do you want from me, right? So just adding one more good habit is a challenge in and of itself. And ways to overcome that include, and then also, it can be subtle at first. So on top of the fact that it's a good habit, you're not sure it's really doing anything, or you're not sure you're doing it right, or one day it worked, but the other day it seemed not to work because you didn't understand that this is a long distance run. So number one, have clarity. That's part of why I share this with you, so that you can have clarity. That clarity will help keep you on track if you have a rough day. It doesn't seem like it's going so great. Number two, make it a priority. Put it on your to-do list. We all know how effective those to-do lists are. Put it on your to-do list. Set an alarm, right? Choose a spot in to have it, our bodies love routine. Choose the same spot every day to do your practice. Do it first thing in the morning if you can. Those routines really help create that consistency. So I know yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And one thing to add to that also is B.J. Fogg, professor out of Stanford, talks about those tiny shifts. So for example, with flossing, he would say, just commit to flossing one tooth. Now, oftentimes what will happen is when you get that one tooth, you'll just be like, oh, heck, I'm going to do them all. but it was just that little tiny shift. So like a 1-minute meditation.
Ah, yeah.
You know, something as simple as, or a standing or meditation or something. Well, Juliana, you taught one of our close friends, John Kane, to practice mindfulness while you're doing things throughout the day. So you can be washing dishes and meditating, folding clothes and meditating, or being mindful, and that could be part of the practice. So stacking it onto something else. We have time for one more question for Juliana. We have 3 hands here. He's more persistent. We'll go there. Yes.
Okay, I've tried. I can't meditate. I'm slightly ADD. I don't sit down well. So my cadence, yours was feel, see, hear. Mine was feel, see, hear. You know, should I try to slow that down? How do I slow that down? Or should I go at my own pace?
Yeah, and in fact, what you're reporting is the most common. Each approach to practice has its strengths and weaknesses. So it's important for you to find what works for you. And that is the common report. If you want to, a weakness to this approach is that people turn their attention towards their experience and they notice, oh my gosh, I'm having all this experience. What do I do about it all? Ah! Right? So it can get overwhelming. So yes, in that case, let experience go by. Choose your moments. So you don't have to label everything. Make the pace of your label. Set that pace of your label. There will be experience to notice. So ground yourself in the nice, even pace. And whatever you happen to be noticing at that moment, you figure out, okay, is that see, hear, or feel? And stay with that. And then, right? Does that make sense? Great. Perfect. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Juliana Ray. That was awesome.
Oh, so cool.
Hey, as a little treat for Juliana, during your presentation,
Yes.
Which was outstanding, our mutual friend and partner of yours, Johnny Berghoff, texted Brother James and I, and he said, I'm going to only read a part of what he said. He said, mark my words, in the next 1 to 2 years, by the way, for those of you who have no context, John is he's a professor at Case Western University, and he is also the founder and managing partner of the Flourishing Leadership Institute, which has partnered with a guy named David Cooper-Ryder, who is the founder of Appreciative Inquiry, blah, blah, blah. If that means nothing to you, he's a total bad to the bone dude right here. And he says, mark my words, in the next 1 to 2 years, Juliana will be globally recognized in a way that makes her one of the very few unquestionable authorities on mindfulness. It is a privilege for us to be in her circle at this stage of her career. And that comes from John Berghoff, so pretty awesome. You will get, should you choose, you will have more of Juliana at about 2:50 this afternoon, where you can explore this more and dig into some questions. I'm guessing throughout the day you'll be here and available as well.
Yes.
So Juliana, thank you so much. That was really awesome.
Did we use up our time?
Yeah, right now we're good. So what I want to share with all of you while we make some announcements and then you'll be heading out, you can just stand right here for this, is that when you are writing the letter to yourself, I would strongly encourage you to perhaps add to the letter as you're going through your day today. So for right now, you might say, I'm committing to doing mindfulness practice, daily for 1 minute, and write that in the letter. Write to yourself, remember Juliana. Remember the commitment I made to myself, so that when you turn that letter in and gets mailed back, it'll help anchor what you've learned today. If you can take one nugget from each of the speakers or presenters today and include that in your letter, that will help you to remember. There's a wonderful book written by Gabriel Cruz called Fluent Forever, and he has research on how we remember languages if we're learning a second language. And what he talks about is that when we learn a new language, let's say today we learn a new word of a new language, there is a time that if we recall that just when we're about to forget it, and we then recall that information, we are far more likely to remember it long term if there has been some space in between, and then we recall it. So that is the purpose of this letter that we're sending out, for you to be able to recall brilliance like what Juliana shared with all of you. Does it make sense? Great, so commit to doing that letter. And just so that we get some commitment here, how many of you, by show of hands, will commit to writing that letter and turning it in today? Show of hands, commit to doing that. Beautiful. With that being said, Carrie, other comments before we head out?
Hey, John, can I say something really quick?
Oh, please, yeah.
For those that weren't here yesterday, this is the letter they're talking about is the note to self on page 9 of your workbook. And it's something that we have you do where you write a letter to yourself and then we mail it to you 6 to 9 months later. So for those that weren't here yesterday.
Beautiful. Yeah, the letter and the envelope are in your book. And if for some reason it's not there, just track down a blue shirt and that very helpful team will find that for you. Gary.
All right, excellent. Let's have a nice round of applause for Juliana once again. We're about to adjourn you to session 4 breakouts, and after that, lunch will be in the ballroom at 11:50. And after lunch, you want to be here on time because Brother James is going to take the stage one more time. That's going to happen at 12:50. Are you ready for some more, Brother James? All right, so we'll see you at the breakouts. Those of you staying in this room for the next breakout, feel free to move up, get comfortable. Everyone else, the breakout room numbers correspond to the floor, which they are on. And enjoy. We'll see everyone back here for Brother James at 12:50.